My name is Brian Widener. I'm a former neo-Nazi skinhead. Not only did God change me physically, he also brought love into a world of hate and violence. When my relative introduced me to being a skinhead, I was 14. We were called Soldiers of the New Reich. I was beaten up a lot just because I was a skinhead, and it was a predominantly Mexican area of town. So violence was a very, very common thing, and you either get hard or you die. And that's the rule, that's it.
Brian Widener came from a broken home. Raised by an alcoholic grandmother, he learned from an early age that he had to take care of himself.
So I learned how to hate. I started getting tattooed at about 14, 15. The tattoo thing was just to signify the whole tough guy look. Oh, I got swastikas and stuff when I was like 16, 17. I got them more for shock value because I really didn't understand the politics behind them. I just knew that they got me in fist fights quite often, so that was why I put them on my body. And after that, that's when I decided, well, I should probably know what they're about, and that's when I started hitting libraries and studying on them and this and that. And that's when I started getting into the politics of everything. Before it was just to piss people off, honestly. I kind of realized the only thing I had achieved in my life was a bunch of scars, a legal record, and halfway cirrhosis of the liver. That's it. I have achieved nothing else in life, nothing positive. I was actually literally trying to drink myself to death. I was just looking for a way out. I was done. I had given up on life. I'd given up on everything. I was just done. I was sick of the violence, but I didn't know any other way to be. If I would have talked to anybody about those feelings, they would have called me a traitor. And then I would have been branded as such and probably shot. So I just bottled it up and drank. That's all I did.
Brian was depressed and on the edge of suicide. Then he met Julie.
I just fell in love with her. After we got married, my former gang got real jealous of the fact that I got married and moved 10 hours away because I was no longer available for their business. I started to working full-time constantly to put food on the table. Right when my son was born, the president actually gave me an ultimatum to choose between them, or the gang, or my family. So I chose my family, and he said, okay, that's fine. We'll just give you a proper retirement, just mail in your patch, which I did.
But it wasn't that simple. Death threats started immediately, and they never stopped.
People would, call up 3 o'clock in the morning and talk about how they're going to kill me and kill the kids. And for years, Julie and I lived literally on red alert. We'd take turns staying up all night with ball bats and stuff, and just wondering when they were going to kick in the door. It wasn't a matter of it wasn't a matter of if, it was just a matter of when. I knew these guys. I knew what they were capable of. And I mean, I'm a pretty tough guy. I can handle myself pretty well, but against 7, 8 guys, there's nothing I can do. But for some reason, Julie picked up a Bible one day. It was this old German Bible that she had for years, a little antique one. Just started thumbing through it and reading it a little bit, and showed me a couple prayers, and just a couple, like a serenity prayer. I started saying that just to calm myself in the mornings, because we were just being curious more than anything. And we went down to Tennessee for Christmas one year, and my father-in-law, just to go visit him for Christmas, and my father-in-law took us to his church. It's a Southern Baptist church out there, and something happened. But the thing was, Julie felt the same thing. And I think it was almost at the same time. I mean, I don't know for sure, but, she looked at me, she's like, did you feel that? I was like, yeah, we got to do something. So we started praying at that point, and praying and reading the Bible, and we actually made a promise to God. It's like, if you help us get out of this alive, we'll give our lives to you. And within a couple of months, we were able to move to Tennessee. And we did, and first thing we did was we gave our lives to God, because there was no way I could have done it by myself. Once I was able to accept Jesus in my life, I was able to actually smile again. I was able to enjoy a day. I was able to be polite and be happy. I was able to enjoy my children. I was able to just enjoy things, and he did that. When he filled me, it patched the hole that was always leaking. And I mean, it's been amazing. It's been absolutely amazing.
With the past lingering on his face, Brian's desire to live a normal life seemed hopeless.
I mean, I'd go out and try to get jobs, and nobody would talk to me. Parent-teacher conferences were always a mess. I mean, it was an absolute nightmare. And I started looking into laser removal, which was entirely just way too expensive. There was no way I'd ever be able to afford it. So I started looking at means of actually using dermal acid and burning them off my skin. And I was just gonna go ahead and suck up the burns.
In a desperate move, Julie contacted the Southern Poverty Law Center. With their help, they located an anonymous donor, and Brian began a painful 2-year journey of removing the tattoos.
It was absolutely amazing. We ended up doing a Q-switch laser out in Vanderbilt University. Dr. Bruchak, he had never seen anything like me before I walked through the door, because I mean, I just had so much coverage that he had never ever taken on something like that. And physically, it was incredibly painful. It took about 23 to 25 treatments, but everything that's happened has been just literally a miracle. The removal, my family is safe, we are safe. We have a beautiful home, I'm working. And it wasn't my doing. I didn't do any of this, you know. I'm barely a high school graduate, you know. I'm not really anything. I'm a former street kid. God has done just miraculous things in my life, and now I can finally give glory where it's due. I can finally give him the credit.
C.J. Blair grew up in the inner city. His mother worked on the streets, and the only father C.J. ever knew was her pimp.
There was no one there to really nurture me and keep me from some of the ills that you encounter just living in, you know, inner city Washington, D.C.
Before long, C.J. was selling drugs and running with gangs.
My intentions was to get my mother off of a corner. And when you present an opportunity for me to make $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a night, then I'm connecting that to my mother can stop selling her body and getting beat up by men.
But there were some bright spots in his life. He spent his summers at his great-grandmother's house, which had a totally different atmosphere.
My great-grandmother believed God for everything. I mean, everything. If it was bread, if it was rent money, whatever it was, she believed it. So she would line me up every night on the side of the bed, and she'd be praying, and, you know, she'd be blessing and so forth and so on, and God keep them. And I was like, wow, this woman is serious. You know, I was the bad guy in the family. I was like the roughest one. But she would never speak as negative about me as the rest of the family. She would always say that I was, you know, a man of God and God gonna do it. And she spoke that in me.
While his great-grandmother had a strong influence on C.J., he wasn't ready to change.
I was scared of hell. I really was scared of hell. And my great-grandmother, she really hammered that home. I knew becoming a Christian was going to take me leaving the lifestyle that I had grown accustomed to. So I wasn't going to play with God.
C.J. dropped out of school and at the age of 13 was arrested for the first time on an assault charge. He spent the next 12 years in and out of jail. Then after serving a 6-year prison term for robbery and malicious wounding, C.J. went into the rap music business with some guys he met in prison.
I was in the studio one night and the studio engineer began to talk about Jesus. He said, if it's a Jesus and you haven't accepted him and you die, you're gonna be short. And God began to start dealing with me at that point.
Just a couple of weeks later, C.J. was driving home from a major drug deal.
And I'm listening to this rap group, and the rap group says that they have platinum currency cards with the mark of the beast on them. When I heard that, something triggered in me. All that talk that my great-grandmother was talking about back then, when I was like 8, 9, here it is now. So immediately, I said, I'm going to hell. And as soon as I thought that, it was like a bolt hit me. My hands flew up, and I began saying, hallelujah, hallelujah. And I heard Jesus say, CJ, audibly, like I'm talking to you right now. CJ, and I said, yes, Lord. And he said, take it out. I popped the tape out the tape deck and started messing with the radio. The guy on the radio said, do you know what miracles are? The radio guy was talking to me, literally. But I knew it was God. I'm scared, because I'm like, I'm getting ready to die. And this is what God do to you before he kill you. He let you know he was real. So next thing I know, my hand is grabbing the coke and throwing it out the window. The marijuana, the cigarettes, everything that my hands touched, it threw out the window. So I remember saying to myself, this better be Jesus, because I done threw away all this money and these folks gonna kill me.
When CJ got home, he went down to the basement.
And I began to pray. I had never prayed as an adult like that. The next day, my mother had came down there and was like, you know, what happened? What was wrong with you? And I literally just said, I'm saved. I just knew that was what had happened. I'm saved.
CJ turned his life over to God and enrolled in Bible college. He also got rid of his guns. But for an ex-drug dealer in the streets of Washington, he was vulnerable. It wasn't even safe for him to get a haircut.
When I was at the barbershop, I was known to tell my barber not to spin me when he cut my hair, but to walk around me and keep me facing the door. Because at that time in the inner city, a lot of young people were getting killed in barbershops. And I would face the door, and if anything came through the door do harm to me, I was gonna get at it before it got at me.
While CJ was getting his haircut, the dealer he owed money to walked in.
This individual was not one that you really wanted to play with. He was a gangster. He would kill you on sight. When he comes through the door, I automatically reach for the gun so I can do something, but I didn't have the gun. The guy walks up on me and he says, I heard you're with Jesus now. And I said, yeah. And he said, pray for me. And he turned around and walked out. And that was a blessing because God really spoke to me and said, I told you I can protect you.
Today, CJ is a pastor, ministering in the same streets where he used to hustle drugs.
I think people need to see people that have made mistakes, but had one point said yes, and Jesus just came and changed their lives. I live a good life as a result of the gospel, the purpose that God has instilled in my life. I represent the guy that was rebellious, that went to prison, the guy that been shot, that did all the wrong things. But I show forth his glory because at any moment when there's one word from the Lord that's interjected in your life, all your past can change.
Sandy Boyd remembers when she played in a field of flowers as a child.
I felt like it was a safe haven for me. I felt loved. I was free to run and sing and dance and move freely without it being directed by someone else.
But that field was only in her mind. Sandy was 12 years old when her father began using her in satanic rituals.
My dad became involved in Satanism and gave his life to Satan and used me in my life as a sexual sacrifice to Satan. Every time that he would come to me and want this to happen, I would just leave and I would go into this field of flowers where I felt safe. It was my place of refuge.
Sandy was born into a family that practiced witchcraft for many generations. She says they even had a guardian spirit to protect them they called Mrs. Coral.
We would ask her questions. We would hear noises if it was yes, and different noises if it was no, and we would conjure her up in seances.
One thing their guardian spirit didn't protect Sandy from was her father.
During the night, he would come in my room and he would start chanting. And when he started chanting, I felt demonic beings around me.
He also forced Sandy to use cocaine to control her. Finally, at 17, she ran away. By now, she was addicted to drugs. She lived on the streets and turned to prostitution to survive.
It was a choice that I made, but it really, at that time, it was the only choice that I had.
That choice was confirmed when Sandy went to her guardian spirit for guidance.
She was the reason I could keep getting up in the morning and thinking that I can go and prostitute myself and make enough to take care of myself.
During the next 10 years, Sandy married and divorced twice and had a daughter from her second marriage. Over that time, the drugs, demon spirits and her father still ruled her life.
When I couldn't find my drugs from other people and other places, then I would always revert back to him.
Sandy gained custody of her daughter. During this time, Sandy's father wanted her to participate in another sexual ritual in exchange for his financial support. This time, she cut ties with her father for good.
I was very repulsed by it. I was repulsed by men in general at that point. I hated them, I despised them, and I refused to do it. I didn't go back.
Sandy and her daughter moved in with Sandy's sister. She thought it would be a place of refuge. Then one night, she says a demonic figure appeared at the foot of her bed.
He said, "It's time now to pass what your grandmother has taught you onto your child." And at that moment, I was terrified.
Sandy was ready to do whatever it took to protect her daughter.
I thought my daughter would be better off if I would just die, and she would end up in foster care with another family, a wholesome, healthy environment, possibly.
So the next morning, Sandy dropped her daughter off at daycare and then drove to a remote area. Her plan was to commit suicide.
I laid the seat of my car back, and both my arms fell to the side, and I felt in between my console and my seat a New Testament Gideon Bible. And this is the very one that I found in my car that day. I don't know where it came from. I just turned to the back, and there was a sinner's prayer in the back. And I could relate to that. And I thought, God, I am a sinner. I have done so many bad things. I give my life to you. Take control. And as I said that sinner's prayer, I felt such a peace that came over me that I'd never felt in my life. Through the sinner's prayer, I recognized that Jesus was real. He was real, and my eyes were open. The blinders were taken off, and I was able to see Jesus for who he was in my life.
Sandy says in that moment, her desire for drugs vanished, and for once in her life, she had hope. But the battle wasn't over. Later that night, she heard her daughter screaming.
She was standing up in her crib, swinging her arms back and forth, and her toys were flying around the room. The ceiling fan was spinning so fast, I thought it would literally drop from the ceiling. And I ran over to her, and she kept saying, "They're biting me, Mommy, they're biting me." And I saw bite marks on her arms. And I picked her up, and we huddled in the corner of that apartment that night. And as I prayed to Jesus, I felt his loving arms just come and wrap himself around me and give me shelter from everything that was going on.
She says the demonic oppression would come back, but through prayer, counseling, and trusting God's word, she was able to hold strong to her faith. She married Scott, who she says helped her on her journey to complete freedom in Christ.
I began walking her through shutting every door that was open and getting everything under the blood of Jesus and just breaking anything off her life.
Sandy says God healed the wounds of abuse and helped her forgive her father, who has since passed away.
The love and compassion comes from the Lord to love the person that hurt me, that caused so much abuse in my life.
Today, Sandy and her husband Scott pastor a church in Garland, Texas, where they help lead others to total freedom in Christ. Brianna is their worship leader.
When I think about what God did for my mom, it's amazing. Because honestly, my life, I don't know where I would be like today, and it makes me want to cry.
Walking in freedom now has been the most amazing experience in my life. I am free. I am free to help others that are in bondage. I am free to proclaim Jesus is the Savior, and he is the only one that can set us free.
If the Son therefore shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed.